If you go to the doctor and you say you're depressed, they always ask, have you thought about killing yourself, right? They always have to ask that. But they don't ask anything after. If you say no, they just go on to the next question. They just go, oh, do you have any allergies? That's it? You don't care about anything else? And then I was like, what would happen if they asked one more question? What if they asked, have you thought about murder? You thought about killing yourself? No. Have you thought about killing someone else? Actually, I have a list. And I have school tomorrow. Here's a doctor's note. Maybe stay home from school and think about suicide instead. I don't know why you're moaning. I'm trying to come up with solutions. I'm trying to save the world. Jesus.
Good morning. It's Monday, Cold War Monday, April the 27th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and the Cold War. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, Varney and Company.
And tomorrow, Varney and Company picks it up. Stu, take it away.
Good morning, Maria. Good morning, everyone. It was dramatic. It was dangerous. And for those at the Correspondents' Dinner, it was frightening. A heavily armed man charged through the Secret Service checkpoint and came close to the president and his cabinet. It's raising questions about having the entire government in one place at one time. And what role did hatred of President Trump play? And how come the Democrats still refuse to fund the Secret Service? The suspect, 31-year-old Cole Allen, is from Torrance, California. He's scheduled to be arraigned in court today. Saturday's shooting has also heightened security concerns for the visit of King Charles and Queen Camilla. They arrive later today in D.C. Buckingham Palace says the visit will, quote, proceed as planned. New development in the war. Iran has offered to end its chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz and has asked the U.S. to end the blockade. The president said, hey, they can pick up the phone if they want to negotiate. To the markets, let's see how your money is doing this Monday morning. Kevin Warsh is likely to be confirmed as the next Fed chair. Senator Tom Tillis has removed his block on the nomination. Don't know when he will lower interest rates. The Dow, though, down about 50 at the opening bell. NASDAQ down about 8. Not much price change. Minor reading so far this morning. Now, this is the key week for earnings from big tech. Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, and Apple, they will all report. This is the week we find out if all that money that's being spent on AI is producing any results. The price of oil, that's back to the high $90 a barrel range. Right now, you're at $96.27. Gas, that's crept back up just a little. The average is now $4.11. California, it's getting close to $6, $5.94 in California. Little change, and diesel, by the way, diesel we've got at $5.44. Now, little change for Treasury yields. It's $4.32 on the 10-year, and as for the 2-year, we're looking now at about $3.78. Where are we? We're $3.80 now. On the show today, we'll look at the extreme language that's fueling political violence. My opinion, Trump derangement syndrome is the backdrop to it all. And how about this? A Kenyan runner won the London Marathon. He set a new world record. He ran the 26-mile course in under 2 hours. Average speed about 13 miles an hour. That's never been done before. Monday, April 27th, 2026.
And that was Varney and Company. Nonprofit news now. Back in a minute.
Five signs of a psychopath. Number 1, chronic lying. Psychopaths don't just lie sometimes, they lie habitually. They can create entire realities to suit their own needs and to manipulate other people. And the worrying part is that they're often very good at it. They can lie with charm and confidence so that other people barely question what they're saying. Number 2, a lack of empathy. Psychopaths don't feel or connect with the emotions of other people on a genuine level. While they can understand emotions intellectually, they just don't feel emotions like compassion, guilt, or remorse. This allows them to cause suffering without feeling an emotional response. Interestingly, many psychopaths can actually fake these emotions as a means to fit in or gain trust. Number 3, superficial charm. Psychopaths can appear highly charismatic, drawing people in by how warm and likable they are. This charm, however, is not genuine and is only at the surface level. It's actually a method psychopaths use to gain trust, manipulate people, and to ultimately achieve their own ambitions. Number 4, impulsivity. Psychopaths can act dangerously without considering the consequences, whereas most people might hesitate or think twice about their actions. Psychopaths can be dangerously impulsive and make reckless decisions without considering the risks to other people. And psychopaths don't feel any guilt or responsibility afterwards. Number 5, grandiose self-worth. If this information was useful, leave a yes and follow for more practical.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Berg.
Hey guys, today we're going to use the foot as a way of diagnosing the liver. And of course, my disclaimer here is that you're not really diagnosing a liver disease. You have to go to the doctor and have them do tests to figure that out. But this will give you some good clues on a potential problem with your liver. Okay? That being said, let's dive in. And these are just little indicators that can actually help you narrow things down. First thing we're going to talk about is the little red and brown dots. They can be larger and smaller, and you can also have like a little shininess to them. They're usually on the lower leg. That is poor circulation, and that is usually a liver problem. It could also be diabetes. It could be many other things, but you see this a lot when people have liver problems. So the actual appearance of the lower leg and the foot gives a lot of great information about the overall health of the person, because the heart has to send blood all the way down to your feet and then back through the vascular system. And usually if there's a liver problem or a heart problem, whatever, there's going to be a vascular problem. And you're going to see it in this part of your body a lot because of the poor circulation that's occurring. So a lot of these problems happen at the greatest distance from the heart. And also even with diabetes, for example, you see neurological problems in your feet and your hands because of that fact, because it affects the distal fingers, which is the point furthest away from the heart. Okay, so you'll see red and brown little discoloration type specks on the lower leg, and then something called spider veins, or another name would be spider nevis, which usually see this in cirrhosis. And what's happening to the liver is you're building up a lot of estrogen, and too much estrogen can affect the vascular system. So you can see varicose veins and spider veins, and you can see them in the lower legs. Then we have cracked heels. Okay, this is usually a vitamin B3 deficiency or an omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. Why? Because one of the functions of the liver is to make bile and help you absorb these fatty acids, not just omega-3 fatty acids, but vitamin A, which could be involved in the skin, vitamin E, which could be involved in the skin. Those are fat-soluble vitamins. But vitamin B3 also affects the skin. Other B vitamins also can affect the skin as well, just how they relate to the cofactor to help the enzymes work, especially with proteins. So B3 deficiency can create a problem. Another name for that would be pellagra. People with pellagra, which is a B3 deficiency, have a lot of skin issues. All right, itching of the foot. Usually in the bottom of the foot, that is a backup of fluids into the liver. It's a congested liver. It could be bile backing up, and you're getting a buildup of histamines, a congested liver, so you can have itching in the foot. Also, you can have pain or inflammation in the bottom of the foot. A lot of times people associate that with something called plantar fasciitis, when it's really not plantar fasciitis. It's just a liver problem. And then you also have hot feet. Hot feet is another symptom of a bad liver. And then we have bad odor. So you have smelly feet. Why? Because the liver is not able to detoxify correctly, and it's backing up through the skin. Usually if the liver's bad, the person's diet is pretty bad, and their entire body is backed up with garbage, especially the large intestine and the kidneys, and it's coming out through the skin. So you can't just have a really terrible, unhealthy, bad liver and have a very healthy kidney or colon. If one is bad, they're usually all pretty congested and unhealthy. Okay, pitting edema. That's where you press your finger into the lower leg and it leaves a dent and it just stays there. That's fluid backup. That's a common liver symptom. Then we have fungus, toenail fungus. People with liver problems have a higher level of fungus growing on their body because they usually have an imbalance in the microflora in the gut, and that is going to relate to an overgrowth of fungus and yeast on the outside of the body. So that's why you see like dandruff and psoriasis, toenail fungus, and then the nail bed. And it could actually happen on the hands or the feet. The nail bed is going to be white. You're going to usually lose that little moon-shaped thing, luna, down here. So it's going to be white because of the poor circulation that's occurring on that nail bed. All right, so then the next question is, what really causes liver problems? A lot of things. One big one is the side effect from medications. Another one is a lot of sugar in the diet, especially high fructose corn syrup. Cooked foods. So if you're just having canned foods, which are pasteurized, and you're not having anything raw, that's eventually going to be very, very hard on the liver and the kidney. And also a lack of any vegetables. And if you're eating junk food combined with that, you have no enzymes to put in the body, no antioxidants from these vegetables, so that can be a problem. Excessive alcohol, that's a given, and then excessive protein. So if you're doing massive amounts of protein, it built up a lot of nitrogen waste. Over time, that can then overload the liver and the kidney and put a lot of stress on it. So if there is liver damage or kidney damage, you want to go a little lower on the protein, higher in the vegetables. Okay, so now what is a good diet for the liver? Now, if you're new to my channel, click the link down below. I will show you a combination of a healthy ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting. Okay, so that's what I'm going to recommend. For those of you that are not new and you've been on my channel, if you watch a lot of videos, you already know this. You're on the program. You're already getting great success.
Thank you. Now, motivation.
Everybody wants to be a beast. Everybody wants to be number one. Everybody wants to be the best. Everybody wants to succeed. Everybody wants to have, to be, and do what they feel they've been called to do. The challenge becomes that most of us, when it's time to do what beasts do, we don't do it. So, E.T., what do you mean? Look, I told you, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I just woke up recently and it was 2:45. And the average person in me said, E.T., just pull the covers back over here. It's okay. You got 15 minutes. But the phenomenal in me said, E.T., if you go back to sleep for those 15 minutes, there's no guarantee you're going to get up at 3 o'clock. If you go back to sleep right now, you might wake up and it's 4 o'clock. You might wake up and it's 5 o'clock. You might wake up and it's 6 o'clock. All you have is right now. Are those 15 minutes that sweet that you're going to push back your dream, that you're going to push back your goal? Everything you've ever wanted, son, you're right there. You're so close. You're closer than you've ever been before. Those 15 minutes are not worth the rest of your life. Those 15 minutes are not worth you slipping down the chart. That is not worth it because you wake up at 3:30. Some other kid's getting up at 3 and he's got 30 minutes on you today. So I need you not only to want to be a beast, I need you to get in beast mode and stay in beast mode. I need you to put on beast mode. And I need you to live in beast mode. Everybody's got a dream. Everybody's got a goal. Everybody wants something in life. But many of you in this room right now, your beast mode is idle. Your beast mode is not turned on. And when you leave this place, I'm telling you, your life is going to go to a whole other level if you can learn to turn that switch on and keep that switch on.
When you want to become a diamond, your whole attitude change, your whole mindset, your thinking, your relationship, the decisions that you make, how you spend your time, your energy, all of it changes. See, this is something that you can't be in this business. This business has to be in you.
Continue to work, continue that course, believing in the worthy cause, the end state of it all, knowing that the pressures and the problems coming to welcome you, those are the situations that are going to formulate and mold you into the person you want to be. Accept this as the reality. Sacrifice this day for the investment in the future, greatness.
So I'm telling you, in life, you start running from a class, you start running from a subject that you don't like, it will haunt you for the rest of your natural life. It ain't going nowhere. You got to take that thing out, like, you got to take the breath out. So some of y'all are afraid of math. Go after it. Go get it. Don't run from it no more. Go get it. You go in there and go get that grade. You go in there and get that information so you can pass that class. You got to go get it. I want you to go in confidence that you've never had before. And every giant in your life, slay them. You go back and slay them. Don't kill them, slay them. I'm tired of people talking about, I want to be successful. I'm tired of people saying, I want to be great. Look, everybody wants to be a beast until it's time to do what real beasts do. And let me tell you something, that means getting up early and going to bed late. That means you don't go to sleep when you're tired. You go when you're done. So remember, success is never on discount and greatness ain't never on sale. I challenge you to have more. I challenge you to do more. I challenge you to be more. You got to get this beast mode. You got to embody beast mode. Everything about you has to say, I ain't playing. If it's to have, I'm going to get it. And I ain't leaving none of it behind. It's mine. Beast mode.
And that was motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little meditation. And that was meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is from an article in the American Thinker called "Can Virginia Be Fixed?" It's the last two paragraphs. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has proven that effective conservative reforms can win over the voters and transform a state from purple to red. It's time to implement similar campaign strategies in the blue states. Start targeting the main sources of money, push back on the media spin, think wisely when it comes to campaign funding, pick winnable fights, and start flipping legislative seats back to the red column. Can it be done in Virginia? Anything is possible. Republicans enjoyed a brief resurgence in the Commonwealth in 2021. They need to figure out what worked, build on those successes, and double down for the future. So what he doesn't talk about, this is basically a blueprint for one-party rule, and because that's what we have politically in this country. Two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, both vying for one-party rule. Each party hates and mistrusts the other, and so they want to and believe that they should, that they're what's best for the country, and so they should run the country, basically. So, and that's false. In a democratic republic, a one-party situation is no good. It's no good for anybody. What he should have been talking about here is crossing over, so to speak. And I don't mean crossing over by making compromises. That's not necessary. What we need to do, though, is talk for Republicans to talk to Democrats and start trying to pick up Democrat votes. Republicans have basically given up, for the most part, on getting Democrat votes. The way it works, dynamic is that the Democrats, each party shores up their base in every election. So they get all their people to make sure their people are all happy and motivated and ready to vote. And then the only people that each party vies for are the independents leaning Democrat, independents leaning Republican, and those are the people that they try to pick up. And that's not good enough. You need to go ahead and Republicans need to go after Democrats. You need to talk to the Democrats and talk to them in their language, as I've said before. So if you're going to, in the state of California, go after, say, Gavin Newsom or the Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, you're not going to say, well, you should, why are you Democrats voting for these people? They keep raising your taxes. Why do you keep voting for these people? They have no respect for property rights. Why do you vote for these people? They support abortion. That's going to fall flat. Democrats are not going to listen to that. It's going to go right over the head. They're just going to shrug it off. But if you go to them and say, hey, you guys want the homeless to be housed. These two individuals have housed no homeless. You want that climate change should be brought under control because you believe that that's an existential threat and that within the next 10 years we'll all be dead. What have Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass done about that? Nothing. Zero. As a matter of fact, they've made it worse with the fires in the Pacific Palisades and in Altadena. They helped to pump millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. What have they done about soaking the rich in terms of getting the rich to pay their fair share? They've done exactly the opposite. They have given tax breaks to the wealthiest Californians. They've given tax breaks to the entertainment industry because apparently all of a sudden the priority is no longer taxing the rich and soaking the rich. It's all about keeping the entertainment industry in California. We can't let the entertainment industry go somewhere else. Sure we can. Anyways, those are the things that they care about. And there's a few more. And you go to the Democrats and give them a report card. They're not necessarily going to come out and vote Republican, but they will vote, could be encouraged to vote for better Democrats. Democrats that are going to be more centrist, if you will. Democrats that are going to be less socialist. So we can have influence that way. We're not necessarily are we going to be able to switch things over overnight or even in an election cycle. But if we do this on a regular basis, I believe we can peel Democrats away from the Democrat Party. I also believe that there are Democrats that want to quit the party and become Republican, but they don't do it because they believe they're not wanted. That since they're Democrats, Republicans don't want them, and so they're just going to stay in the Democrat Party. And so they feel like there's no place else to go. And so if we reach out to them, we let them know, yes, there is. Yes, you are welcome in the Republican Party. And that's what he should have, this author should have talked about in his article here. That's the true solution, short-term, long-term, at the state level and at the federal level. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now something from Maria Bartiromo and Company about the assassination attempt that happened, I believe it was yesterday.
I'll tell you, an incredible tragedy was averted Saturday night. But this is a cascading systems of failures. And these are all Gen Z guys, all these 20 to 29-year-old. This individual was 31 years old, who are grievance collectors. They're part of this new assassination culture where they take a grievance, some triggering event happens, then they apply an ideology to it and their own moral absolutism, and they believe that doing this, stopping what they consider to be an existential threat, is a way to be a hero. And in this instance, to be able to take a train all the way from California through Chicago into New York, and at no point along the way are there any security checkpoints. And I think that is the real weakness in the system here.
Okay, so he's basically suggesting that, again, we should be TSA-like, that the government should step in and only allow people to travel that are approved. That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. It is unconstitutional. It is inhumane. It is wrong all the way around. What's going on in airports with TSA is wrong, and it shouldn't happen. If the airports and the airlines the airlines, I think the airports are more or less government agencies. But if the airlines, they want to screen people and say, we're only going to allow people on our aircraft that we approve of, they can do that. It's their property. But the government has no business doing that. The government must not, ever be in a position where they're deciding who's allowed to fly and who isn't, or who's allowed to take the train or who isn't. That's absolutely abysmal. That is going the direction that the liberals want us to go. Heavy-handed, top-down government in which the government believes it has the right to do things, and it does not. The government has no rights. The people have rights. The government has authority, and that rights must, authority may. Now, furthermore, is that what this guy is missing here, and he was a former FBI agent, and what he missed, and what everybody's missing, is that this is an excellent opportunity for political propaganda, for Republican propaganda, an excellent opportunity to score points for the upcoming midterms, okay? The Republicans and conservatives are very good in this country at whining. They're good at whining and complaining. Oh, woe is me. Things aren't the way I want them to be. Oh, I can't buy guns. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, there's paper ballots and mail-in ballots. Oh, it's the Republican Party's become Doug and Wendy Whiner from Saturday Night Live. And that's what they're best at, whining and complaining, instead of using the information that they're getting for a political purpose. In this particular case, let's blame somebody. Fix the blame fast. Who is it that's really responsible for this? It is Chuck Schumer and his cohorts up on Capitol Hill that are encouraging, through their rhetoric, through their speeches, encouraging people, Gen Zers, Xers, whoever, to go ahead and become assassins. So it's long past time for us to point that out and to say, if I was the president, I would have my own channel, the president's channel, and I would tell the American people, we're going to investigate Chuck Schumer because we believe that he has conspired with this individual to attempt to assassinate the president of the United States. We're furthermore going to investigate his large donors who we believe are also complicit, and we'll see how that goes, because Chuck Schumer is basically the one to blame here. This was a political activity. It wasn't personal. This guy didn't have any personal grudge against Donald Trump. It's not like Donald Trump slapped him or flipped him off or something like that. He is doing this for political reasons, and he's being encouraged to do this by politics and politicians. And so we need to come out and use this as a way to strike a blow for republicanism and conservatism. But they're missing out. Again, they miss out on an excellent opportunity to score some political points. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Cold War.
On the 2nd of March 1978, a nuclear-powered attack submarine departed Charleston, South Carolina, on a patrol that its crew knew was unusual and whose details they were not permitted to discuss. The USS Batfish, a Sturgeon-class attack submarine commanded by Commander Thomas Evans, was not going out on a standard patrol rotation. It had been sent to find a specific Soviet submarine and follow it without being detected, without making contact, without revealing itself in any way, for as long as the Soviet boat remained at sea. The mission had a code name, Operation Evening Star. Its objective was to demonstrate something that the United States Navy needed to know with certainty, that American attack submarines could track Soviet ballistic missile submarines throughout their entire deterrent patrols, staying close enough to maintain targeting solutions, close enough to destroy them if ordered, without the Soviets ever knowing they were there. The mission would last 77 days. The Batfish would not surface once. To understand why Operation Evening Star mattered, it is necessary to understand what a Yankee-class submarine represented in the strategic calculus of the Cold War in 1978, and why the ability to track one silently for the duration of an entire patrol was not merely a tactical achievement, but a strategic revelation with consequences that would ripple through the Cold War for the better part of a decade. The Yankee class, designated Project 667A by the Soviet Navy, was the Soviet answer to the American Polaris ballistic missile submarine. It had entered service in 1968, the product of a crash program to give the Soviet Navy a modern sea-based deterrent that could match American capability. The Polaris submarines had demonstrated that a sea-based nuclear force could be genuinely survivable in ways that land-based missiles could not, because a submarine at sea in a vast ocean was orders of magnitude harder to find and destroy than a missile silo whose coordinates were precisely known. The Soviet Navy had understood this and had built the Yankee class to replicate it. By 1978, over 30 Yankee-class submarines were in service, operating from bases on the Kola Peninsula in the northwest and Kamchatka in the Pacific, conducting deterrent patrols that kept their missiles within range of American and Allied targets on a continuous basis. A Yankee-class submarine, displaced approximately 9,000 tons submerged, was powered by 2 VM, 4 pressurized water reactors, and carried 16 R-27 ballistic missiles in vertical launch tubes arranged in 2 rows behind the sail. Each missile carried a nuclear warhead with a yield in the megaton range. The missiles had a range of approximately 2,400 to 3,000 kilometers, which placed a significant constraint on where the Yankee needed to operate to hold its assigned targets at risk. To threaten Washington, New York, or the major American East Coast cities, a Yankee on patrol in the Atlantic needed to be in a relatively defined patrol area in the Norwegian Sea or North Atlantic, within a rough band of ocean that American strategic planners had mapped with considerable precision. The Soviet Navy knew that American forces knew this, and it devoted considerable effort to making the transit from the Kola Peninsula to the patrol areas and the behavior within those areas as difficult to detect and monitor as possible. The question that Operation Evening Star was designed to answer was whether those efforts were sufficient. This was the fundamental strategic tension that the operation was designed to probe. Soviet ballistic missile submarines on patrol in the Norwegian Sea and North Atlantic were the most direct nuclear threat to the eastern United States. Their missiles could reach Washington with flight times measured in minutes, not hours. The Soviet Union counted on these submarines as the core of its second strike capability, the force that would survive an American first strike and retaliate with sufficient destructive power to make the first strike. Irrational. If that survivability could be put in serious question, if it could be demonstrated that American attack submarines could locate and maintain contact with Soviet missile boats throughout their patrols, without those boats ever knowing, the strategic calculus of the entire Soviet nuclear posture shifted in ways that had implications far beyond the tactical level. The Batfish had been built for exactly this kind of mission. The Sturgeon class, of which Batfish was the 11th boat, launched, had been designed with anti-submarine warfare as its primary purpose, a deliberate departure from the design philosophy of earlier American attack submarine classes that had emphasized speed and general-purpose capability. The Sturgeon boats were slower than their predecessors, but quieter, and in the Cold War underwater contest between detection and evasion, quietness was the decisive variable. A submarine that could not be heard could stay in contact with its target indefinitely. A submarine that could be heard was a submarine that would be shaken off, and in the worst case, a submarine that would be hunted. The Sturgeon class achieved its quietness through a combination of design choices that reflected a decade of hard-won understanding about how sound propagated from a submerged submarine and how it could be reduced. The machinery was mounted on vibration-isolating rafts that prevented mechanical noise from being conducted directly into the hull. The propeller was designed with particular attention to cavitation, the bubble formation that occurs when a propeller moves through water at speed and that produces a distinctive acoustic signature audible at long ranges. The hull form was shaped to minimize flow noise. The electronics and sonar systems were among the most capable deployed by any navy in the world. The electronics and sonar systems were among the most capable deployed by any navy in the world, giving the Sturgeon boats a detection range advantage over the Soviet submarines they were designed to hunt. The Batfish also carried a towed sonar array, a system that extended more than 1,000 feet behind the submarine on a cable, placing the array's hydrophones far enough from the submarine's own machinery noise that they could detect contacts at ranges the hull-mounted arrays could not reach. Towed array technology had been developing throughout the 1970s and represented a significant advance in the ability of American attack submarines to locate and classify contacts at long ranges before those contacts were aware of being detected. It was this extended acoustic reach, combined with the Batfish's own quietness, that made the kind of operation Evans was assigned theoretically possible. Whether it was practically achievable over 50 days of continuous trailing was a question that only the patrol could answer. Commander Thomas Evans had commanded the Batfish since 1977 and had brought it to a state of readiness that his superiors considered appropriate for the demands of Operation Evening Star. Evans was 40 years old, a career submarine officer whose service had spanned the transition from diesel to nuclear propulsion and who had absorbed the doctrine and culture of the Cold War submarine service over 2 decades at sea. He was selected for this mission not because it was the natural next step in a command rotation, but because the Navy had assessed him and his crew as capable of executing an operation with very little margin for error over a very long period of time. A mistake at any point in 50 days of trailing, an acoustic signature that the Soviet sonar team detected, a navigation error that brought the Batfish too close to its target, could compromise not just the operation, but the broader intelligence program that depended on Soviet ignorance of American trailing capabilities. American intelligence had identified a specific Yankee-class submarine preparing to depart the Soviet naval complex on the Kola Peninsula in late February or early March 1000, 978. The intelligence came from multiple sources. CIA-sponsored Norwegian intelligence activities monitored Soviet naval movements near the North Cape with a thoroughness that the Soviets did not fully appreciate. American spy satellites tracked surface activity at Soviet submarine bases. And SOSUS, the underwater acoustic monitoring network that had been detecting Soviet submarine movements for 2 decades, had the approaches to the Kola Peninsula under continuous surveillance. When the intelligence picture suggested that a Yankee was about to sortie for a deterrent patrol, the Navy had the Batfish in position and ready. On the 17th of March 1978, 15 days after departing Charleston, and well above the Arctic Circle in the Norwegian Sea, the Batfish's sonar room picked up a contact. The sonar supervisor called the control room. The bearing was 062. The acoustic signature was consistent with a Soviet Yankee-class ballistic missile submarine. The contact was the boat they had been sent to find. Commander Evans positioned the Batfish in the trailing position that Cold War doctrine specified for this kind of operation. Too close, and the turbulence from the Soviet submarine's propeller would mask the Batfish's own sounds, increasing the risk of collision and degrading the quality of acoustic intelligence being collected. Too far and contact would be lost in the acoustic clutter of the Norwegian Sea, which was full of fishing vessels, oil exploration activities, and the natural noise of a busy stretch of high-latitude ocean. The trailing position was the narrow band between these extremes, and Evans's job was to maintain it through whatever the Soviet submarine did over the days and weeks ahead. The Yankee did not behave as if it suspected it was being followed. It proceeded on its patrol profile, which was the information that the Navy most needed to collect. Every maneuver the Soviet boat made, every depth change, every speed adjustment, every time it approached periscope depth, every heading change that indicated a new patrol leg, all of it was recorded by the Batfish's sensors and noted in the patrol log. The Soviet crew went about the business of a deterrent patrol, which meant maintaining readiness, standing watches, conducting the maintenance that kept a nuclear submarine operational, and waiting out the days and weeks until the patrol was complete and they could return to base. None of them knew that an American submarine was a few thousand yards behind them, recording everything. On March 19, after 51 hours of trailing and approximately 350 nautical miles of contact, the Batfish lost the Yankee. A severe storm had moved into the Norwegian Sea, and the acoustic conditions deteriorated sharply as the sea state increased. The noise of the storm masked the Soviet submarine's signature below the threshold where the Batfish's sonar could maintain reliable contact. Evans reported the loss of contact, and the Navy responded. AP-3 Orion Maritime Patrol aircraft was dispatched from Reykjavik, Iceland, to search for the Yankee using its own acoustic sensors. The P-3 located the Soviet submarine and provided Batfish with updated position information. By March 21, Evans had maneuvered back into trailing position. Contact was re-established. What followed over the next 44 days was a sustained performance of the kind of submarine trailing operation that the United States Navy had been developing, the doctrine and technology to execute for 2 decades. The Batfish followed the Yankee through the Norwegian Sea, into the North Atlantic, through the patrol areas where the Soviet missile boat held American targets at risk. The daily reality of the trail was a combination of technical discipline and human endurance that tested every system aboard the Batfish and every member of its crew. The sonar teams worked in rotating shifts around the clock, listening for the acoustic signature of the Yankee through the constant background noise of the ocean. The Norwegian Sea in March and April is not a quiet acoustic environment. Commercial shipping generates broadband noise across a wide frequency range. Fishing fleets, which were numerous in these waters, produced their own distinctive acoustic clutter. Oil exploration activities generate impulsive noise from seismic surveys. The deep sound channel carries noise from distant sources, sometimes at ranges of hundreds of miles, that can mask closer contacts. Maintaining contact with a specific submarine through this environment over days and weeks required the kind of sustained, expert listening that came only from experience. And the sonar teams on the Batfish had that experience in the concentrated form that Cold War submarine service produced. The navigation challenge was equally demanding. Evans had to maintain the Batfish in trailing position relative to a submarine that was maneuvering continuously in 3 dimensions, changing depth, speed, and course on a schedule determined by the Soviet patrol plan rather than any convenience for the trailing boat. The Batfish had to anticipate these maneuvers, match them without closing too much or falling too far behind, and do all of this without any of the navigational aids available to a surface vessel. The geometry of trailing a submerged submarine through the open ocean, keeping the relative positions correct in 3 dimensions without visual reference, was a problem in applied acoustics and navigation that Evans's team solved continuously for 50 days. The Yankee executed the standard Soviet SSBN patrol profile, which involved a series of patrol legs at various depths and speeds, periodic approaches to periscope depth for communications checks, and occasional maneuvers that Soviet doctrine specified as checks for trailing submarines. The Crazy Ivan maneuver, a rapid course reversal designed to illuminate any submarine that had been following in the baffles, the acoustic blind spot directly behind a submarine, where its own propeller noise masked incoming sound. Each Crazy Ivan required Evans to respond immediately, either accelerating to maintain contact through the turn or dropping back to avoid the risk of being detected during the maneuver. The Yankee never caught the Batfish executing one of these responses. 50 days of Crazy Ivans, and none of them worked. The Batfish followed the Yankee through fishing fleets, where the acoustic clutter of dozens of trawler engines operating at close range made contact maintenance a constant exercise in signal extraction from noise. It followed through weather that degraded acoustic conditions and demanded patience from the sonar teams to maintain the thread of contact against a background that the storm was making harder by the hour. The total trail covered more than 10,000 nautical miles of shadowing over the course of the Yankees' approximately 8,000 nautical mile patrol route. The Batfish traveled further than its target because trailing from behind requires matching every course change and then some to avoid falling too far back when the target turns away. By the time the Soviet Yankee turned and began its transit back toward the Kola Peninsula, the Batfish had accumulated a record of that submarine's patrol that was without precedent in the history of American anti-submarine warfare operations. The trail had covered more than 10,000 nautical miles over 50 days. Every aspect of the Soviet submarine's operational behavior had been observed and recorded. Its patrol areas, its depth discipline, its speed profiles, its communication procedures, its maintenance patterns, the acoustic characteristics of its propulsion system at various speeds and depths, the specific timing and geometry of its Crazy Ivan maneuvers, the frequencies and intervals at which it approached periscope depth. The intelligence value of the operation was, by any assessment, extraordinary. The Navy now knew not just that a Yankee could be trailed, but how one actually behaved on a deterrent patrol. And the difference between doctrine and practice in Soviet submarine operations was information that shaped American anti-submarine warfare planning for years. Evans brought the Batfish back to Charleston on May 17, 77 days after departing. The submarine had not surfaced once during the entire patrol. The crew surfaced into the South Carolina Spring, having spent nearly 3 months in a sealed steel tube beneath the Atlantic, having followed a Soviet nuclear submarine through its entire deterrent patrol, having collected intelligence that reshaped American understanding of how Soviet ballistic missile submarines actually operated at sea, rather than how doctrine predicted they would operate. The operation was classified immediately and completely. The crew could not discuss what they had done. The intelligence collected was distributed within the most closely held compartments of the American intelligence community and used to update assessments of Soviet submarine operations, patrol patterns, and acoustic characteristics. Commander Evans received recognition for the patrol within the classified system, but the recognition could not be public, and the achievement could not be acknowledged. The Batfish returned to its regular patrol rotation. Operation Evening Star joined the long list of Cold War submarine operations that existed only in classified files. The Soviets learned what had happened, but not through any failure of American security on the classified files. The Soviets learned what had happened, but not through any failure of American security on the operational level. John Anthony Walker was a chief warrant officer in the United States Navy who had been providing classified information to the Soviet Union since 1968, the year he walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington and offered to sell naval secrets for money. Walker had access to cryptographic material and to information about American naval operations that was of enormous value to Soviet intelligence, and over 17 years he systematically passed that information to his handlers. He recruited his brother, his son, and a colleague into the espionage network, and the damage the Walker Ring caused to American naval security was assessed when the arrests came in 1985 as among the most severe intelligence losses of the Cold War. Among the information Walker passed to the Soviets was the fact that American attack submarines had been successfully trailing Soviet ballistic missile submarines throughout their deterrent patrols without detection. The Soviets had not known this was happening. Their submarines had been conducting patrols on the assumption that they were operating in environments where, even if American forces eventually detected them, the detection would be transient and would not persist for the duration of a patrol. The revelation that American submarines could and did maintain contact for weeks at a time, undetected, through the full length of a deterrent patrol, required a fundamental reassessment of Soviet submarine operations and communications security. The operational consequences of Walker's revelations for Soviet submarine practice were significant. Patrol profiles were changed. Communications procedures were revised. Greater emphasis was placed on acoustic quieting and on detection of trailing submarines. The Soviet Navy invested in counter-trailing doctrine and in equipment that would make future trailing operations more difficult. These changes imposed costs and altered the risk calculus of Soviet submarine operations in ways that the Navy would have to account for in subsequent operations. But the strategic implication went deeper than doctrine and equipment changes. If American attack submarines could trail Soviet ballistic missile submarines throughout their patrols without detection, then the Soviet Second Strike Force was not what Soviet strategists had believed it to be. The Yankee-class submarines on deterrent patrol in the Norwegian Sea were not invisible, survivable retaliatory weapons held in reserve against a first strike. They were being watched. They could be targeted. In a war's opening moments, they could be destroyed before they launched. Secretary of the Navy John Lehman stated publicly in 1985 that American submarines would attack Soviet missile submarines in the first 5 minutes of a war, a statement that was made credible precisely because of what operations like Evening Star had demonstrated about American trailing capability. The bedrock assumption of Soviet nuclear strategy, that its sea-based deterrent provided a reliable second strike capability that guaranteed mutual destruction, was not as solid as it had appeared. Rear Admiral Sumner Shapiro, who had been Director of Naval Intelligence in 1978, assessed in retrospect that Soviet awareness of American trailing capability had been a significant factor in the Soviet Union's eventual willingness to negotiate arms reductions. If Soviet ballistic missile submarines could not be relied upon to survive and retaliate, the strategic logic that justified the enormous expense of maintaining and improving them became harder to sustain. The realization that the United States could track Soviet submarines anywhere in the world's oceans, and that this capability had been operational for years without Soviet awareness, was the kind of revelation that forced a strategic recalculation. Some analysts have argued, and the argument has entered the mainstream of Cold War historiography, that the success of operations like Evening Star, communicated to the Soviets through Walker's espionage, contributed to the Soviet conclusion that the arms race was producing weapons whose survivability, and therefore whose strategic value, was substantially less than advertised. The details of Operation Evening Star were partially declassified in June 1999, more than 2 decades after the patrol. A press conference was held in March 2001 as part of a program marking the centennial of the United States Submarine Force, bringing together veterans of the operation and allowing them to speak publicly about what they had done for the first time. The Smithsonian Magazine published a detailed account in its March 2001 issue based on the declassified material, written by Thomas B. Allen from interviews with Evans and other participants. Commander Evans, by then a retired Rear Admiral, described the technical and human demands of the operation in terms that made clear how much sustained skill and discipline the trail had required. The 50 days of continuous contact had not been 50 days of routine monitoring. The acoustic environment of the Norwegian Sea and North Atlantic was constantly changing, and the sonar teams had worked through every variation of it, maintaining contact through conditions that ranged from favorable to nearly impossible. The navigation team had kept the Batfish in position relative to a submarine that was making constant adjustments in course and depth, managing the three-dimensional geometry of the trail without any of the reference points available to a surface vessel. The engineering team had maintained the submarine systems through 77 days of continuous submerged operation, which was not a routine achievement even for a nuclear submarine.
And that was the Cold War. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you're not neutral and that the government has no rights.